Hey, it's Tanya here. I'm back in the studio. It's a couple of days later and I want to trim those pieces that I made. Remember these pieces? It's time to actually trim them. So I just want to share a few little tips about it, of what I do even before I start trimming. Let me show you with a smaller piece. So here's a smaller piece, exact same concept. Excuse the dog coming in here. I can just hear these little footprints coming along. Okay, so see this little piece. What I've done, as you can see, I've trimmed a foot and I've trimmed it in, and in the center I've left it the same height as the outer foot ring. Now I'm going to do the same on the big ones, and because it's so wide I might even leave one in between. So it'll be the center, one on the outside and one in between, all at the same height, and then trim the rest in. So by trimming the rest in, I'm back. I totally lost my train of thought of what I was trying to explain to you. By trimming this in, you're taking weight out of the piece, which is obviously what we want. I add little grooves here. I think it's just a bit forgiving. So if it's not perfect, this takes it away with your eye. It takes it away and makes it look more perfect. So it's just a little cheat, I suppose. But I like it. It looks quite pretty. So the reason I leave this raised and the outer foot raised, and when it's a bigger piece, I leave one or so in between, depending on the size. The reason I leave them raised, it actually prevents the center from slumping, because if I just have the outer, especially on a wider piece, this isn't so much, this is more to match the bigger pieces, but if it's on a wide piece, you have such a wide area of a narrow piece that the center really slumps, or should I say it's easy to slump. I'm not saying it always does. So this is a little bit of a prevention from that happening. So your center will always stay the same level as the outer foot. So that's a little tip. Okay, let me show you another thing I do with the big pieces before I put them on the wheel and start trimming. Now that I've rotated the camera down, I wanted to show you a few other things I do before I even get it on the wheel. I actually cut the piece, I wire the piece off, but I actually wire it straight after I've made it, because it's really hard sometimes to pull the wire through. I don't move it, I don't remove it from the back, I literally just put the wire through. But I'll show you how it's done. This happens after I've made them, not after it's drying. You can do it after it's drying, but it seems to be a lot harder to pull the wire through. So when you wire a piece off, a lot of people, and we all get it, is where you cut it. If you pull it towards yourself, you cut it and you take a big chunk out of it. To prevent that, you want to keep the wire flat on the bat the whole time, consistently. The way to do that, you take it behind the piece, you're going to drag it towards yourself. So you get to the bottom of the piece, and as you can see, the wire is flush with the bat. Now you keep it that way the whole time. That's why my fingers, as you can see, are flat, pushing on the bat. And I've got the wires taut, so I'm basically pulling it away from each other and towards myself. But keep your fingers on the bat, as you can see. So I'm pulling through. As you can see, my fingers haven't moved. They are flush. Oops. This is moving because I have already done this. But what you actually do, you pull it towards yourself, and as you can see, then I keep one where it is and pull the other piece towards the other finger. So I'm going to leave this one flat on the bat, and I'm just pushing the wire down. Then this one, remember, this all happens just after I've thrown the piece. So this one stays flat now, and now I'm going to pull this one towards this one, keeping it flat on the bat, pressure down and towards the other one. So as you can see now, I'll be pulling. Now I'll get my thumb on that piece, so it's still flat, nothing's moved, and I'm pulling it, look, pulling it, so there you go. Now it is dead straight and nothing was lifted and pulled up. This shifted a bit because I've already had done this, but you see how easy it is to go through. So now when I want to remove it from the bat, I do what I did now again when I'm ready to trim. So I did it the first time as I threw it. Now I'm ready to trim. I do it again just to release any that may have stuck back on. What I want to do now, when you trim, if I just turn it over, the center is a good chance it could slump, especially if it's a little bit too wet still. I'm not 100% sure of this. It feels a little bit damp, so there's a good chance it could slump. So what I do is, you want to actually put something in the center the same level as the rim. So what I have got, I've got some foam that I use. You can use anything, but this is a piece of foam which I'll get to at some other stage. And I know it is close to that. It's still a little bit low, but it's not going to get my center to slump because it's going to be the same level. So what I'm going to do is put a thin piece of foam. These come from your cone boxes. We all know about those. So that just adds a slight bit extra. Now I know that that is more or less the same level. So nothing is going to slump. The whole piece is going to stay straight. So then I get my bat. This is a sponge bat, which I made. I'll show you that also at another stage. It's just some foam stuck to an old bat. But it prevents the rim from getting hurt. And I've drawn rings on it with a Sharpie. So when I do turn it over and I want to center it, I use these rings as a guide to have the piece center on the wheel, which is another handy little tip. But right now, I'm not too worried about the centering. I'm more worried about flipping it over. So I put it on top of the other piece. I do try and have it a bit center, so I can actually feel it's more or less, you know, with your fingers, you can feel the little bit of distance from the piece. I can feel around, it feels similar. So I take the other bat, now I'm going to flip it over. And now, because I've put those pieces on the inside, the center of the platter isn't going to slump. So I'm going to turn it over, as you can see. Now I can remove my bat. And that's any clay. As you can see, any clay that we had, it's all level. You see, not one piece is higher than another. And that's because of keeping your fingers flush the whole way. And as you can see, this isn't slumping now. So this is ready to go on the wheel and ready to start trimming those 3 rings. Let me show you. As I was showing you, the 3 rings. I'm going to probably do 3 on here. 1, 2, and a center. So that it doesn't slump and stays straight during the firing and all along. And it looks quite pretty. So it keeps your pieces unique. Let me go on the wheel and we're going to trim this. Okay, I'm at the wheel. Remember, I flipped this over onto a sponge bat that I'd created. I center it inside the lines, but center into the lines. So I'm just double checking that. As you can see, that's pretty center. So now I can start trimming. I just wanted to show you the tools that I use to trim. Firstly, I just use a flat. Oh, can you see that? I use a flat piece just to go over it once and just give it a flat, smooth surface before I even start. It is pretty flat, but you know, there's always little bits of clay and bits that have rolled up. I take it off with one of these first. Then I use this probably the most. And that just, with the corner, I get in the groove and create my rings. Then in between the rings, I use one of these. It's just quite straight and flat. And what I like to do between the rings that I've created, which I explained earlier, I usually make it that distance between each one, and that often determines how many rings I have. I just think it looks nice to have the same distance. That's purely a personal thing, nothing else. But I use that. And then to make the little grooves around in between each foot ring, I use a tiny ball tool. It's an embossing tool actually, and that creates the little grooves in between each foot ring. And then lastly but not least, for my little logo, I always put it in the center. I do a little spiral using the embossing tool, a mini spiral, and I end it with my handy dandy TaniaRustage stamp. So let me trim, and if there's anything I need to explain, I'll explain it as I go. Let's go. Firstly, as you can see, I'm taking off any little bits of grit. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it's just getting any bits of grit off. Now I start with my main tool. I always do the edge first, and I give myself an angle. Remember I explained that we like the pieces to be lifted, so I already did that angle the other day using this tool. Remember I explained when I created it by putting it at the bottom to create a nice angle. Well, I've got my angle here now, but now that I've cut it off, obviously it gives a bit of a weird edge. So I neaten it like this and even create more of an angle so your platter looks raised and floating off the table. So that's what I do first, get my angle. There you go, I've created my angle. My next thing to do, using the same tool, is to create my foot rings. So I want my foot ring to be, I don't know, that's half an inch, I'm guessing, but it's roughly there. Okay, so I'm create that ring. That's all I'm doing, is creating the one ring. Now I get the one that I want the distance in between, and I go from where I've created that ring, and I just give myself a guide basically where the next one's going to be. So now with my little tool again, I'm creating my next foot ring. So I usually do it about the similar size to that. So that'll be about there. So now I've created 1 foot ring, 2 foot rings. Now my distance. Okay, so there's my distance between one foot ring, 2 ring. I'm going to have 3 foot rings. Okay, in this case, I'm going to be having 3 foot rings and a center. Remember, this is all personal taste. No one says you have to do any of this. I like it. I think it looks good, but it does have a function. It prevents this center from slumping. So now I'm going to create my distance, purely because I like it to all be symmetrical. Another Tania thing. And now I've marked off my center. So basically, I've marked off where I want my center and my foot rings to be. What I do now is I trim out in between those. Wherever I had this, I'm now going to trim that out lower to take out weight from the whole overall piece, and where I'm going to put all those little grooves using the embossing tool. So let me trim all this and we'll speak just now. Just want to show you what I was taught a while back. When I first started trimming years ago, I actually hated trimming until someone showed me this little technique, because I kept going too deep into the piece. I just couldn't get it right for some reason. So what they taught me is to create little grooves first. So I'm creating, as you can see, I'm creating like a groove, a groove, a groove, a groove, a groove. You do this on any piece that you trim, not just a platter. So you create your little grooves. Then you can trim out the top piece of the grooves. As you can see, now I trim out the top piece of it. I trim out, so each ring I just made of my trimming section, I trim out. And for some reason, that made trimming a lot easier. I don't know why that actually worked, but it made it a lot easier for me to understand, to get the concept, and it just seems to work. So that's how I do it. As you can see, I've established 4 beautiful foot rings to prevent the slumping. You could actually stop right here. You don't have to do the little grooves in between with this little embossing tool. But now I'm going to make my little grooves in between each foot ring. Basically, it hides any imperfections, to be honest with you, because it actually fools the eye. So I'm going to do it. I do them on all my pieces because it's become a thing now, and I actually think it looks quite nice. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll get back to you just now. So I space them. It's my own choice here. So I just space them a few millimeters apart. So there you go. I actually take my tool and just clean up. I trim very gently over the top, more to remove this than to trim. As you can see, it's removing it. And then I take my sponge and neaten it up. And what I do at the end, I'm going to finish doing these, and what I do at the end is in the center, I still take this little embossing tool, I do a tiny little spiral. As I showed you earlier, I like my spiral on the other side, on the front side, to show that I've thrown the piece, and I think it looks quite pretty. So I do the same with my little logo. I do a tiny spiral in the center and pull away. Also neaten that up. And then at the end of my spiral, where it goes, where it ends, I stamped my little stamp. I'm not going to do it now because I'm still busy cleaning up. And there you have, over a few days, we've made a platter start to finish. Please remember that none of this is necessary. This is just my way and the way I like to do it. You can do anything your way. There's no right or wrong way. That is my whole concept. There's no right or wrong. It's my way. And that's it. So I hope you enjoy it and find your own way, or use this way. I like it. I hope you like it too. Well, if you enjoyed that video and found it helpful and you got something out of it, please keep following me. Subscribe, like, follow, comment, only nice comments. You know how it goes. Just the usual stuff. So please carry on following me. I am enjoying doing this. I'm still new to it, as you all know. And we'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Bye.